Welcome back to Programming with Qt Widgets. In this module, we'll go a bit behind the stage and see some of the classes that helps out. We'll talk about a class like QString, about regular expression and file handling in Qt. We'll talk about QVariant and the property system. And I will hand over to Jesper Pedersen, also known as Pepe, to talk about container classes. So Qt comes with a class called QString. Why on earth would a UI library come with a string class when we have nifty good string classes in C++ called std_string? Well, Qt was created back in 1994 and things were slightly different back then. So just cope with it, and you can't get away from QString because it's all over the place. If you go and ask a Qt text edit for the text in the text edit, it will return you a QString. If you want to set the text on a label, you will have to give it a QString, and so on and so on. So let's see, what does a QString class provide us? It does provide us some facilities that you'll not find in std_string itself, because std_string is a very thin class, meaning it doesn't have a lot of API around storing the data, while QString has a lot of utility functions built into QString, which makes it rather easy to work with. So first of all, how do you create a QString? Well, that is relatively easy. You just provide a char pointer in the constructor to a QString. So if you have a char pointer for ABC, just specify it like this. Or if you already have a string, you can specify it using, or you can provide it using the assignment operator, simply like this. You will likely by now, if you have done just a bit of Qt programming, you'll have noticed that we have this QString literal class, and QString literal is an optimization. I talked quite a bit with Pepe, who is my go-to guy when it comes to what should I be using in Qt and what is sane to use. Should I litter my whole application with QString literals? And he often says stuff like, well, that is an optimization for the last few percentage of performance. Indeed, if you have somewhere in your code where you're doing a lot of comparison to fixed strings in inner loops, then it might make sense to have a QString literal. But in most cases, you'll get by with these two. In any case, do go and watch this Qt Widgets and More episode, that's a link on the screen now, that tells you, or where I have a conversation with Jesper about what classes and what facilities in Qt are available for string comparison and providing API with strings and so on. For now, let's just accept that we'll most often use these things. Sometimes you will not even create a QString. You'll just have a label that you provide a string to. So label set text and then in quotes ABC. I don't know why you would have ABC on your labels, but hey, if you do, then you provide it like that rather than go through creating a QString. Behind the scene, of course, the constructor taking one parameter, which is exactly this one up here, will be called. And if you already are maintaining a large code base, and you say, yes, but that doesn't work, I've tried that. Well, that's likely because somebody set a flag to your compiler called QNoCast from ASCII, I believe it's called. That one prevents you from doing that. And that's a good idea if you are making your application available for translation, but much more on that much later in this series on programming with Qt Widgets. For now, you can get to a string from a number by simply calling : number. That's a static method on QString. That will give you a string with that number in here. If you know that the text that you have in a char pointer is in some specific encoding, then there is a number of overloaded or number of named constructors, I would call them, for QString here. QString from Latin 1, QString from UTF-8, and so on. And if you have something completely different, say big 5 encoding, then you need to create an instance of QText codec to do the conversion there. Again, much later in this series to talk about that. Finally, you might find, if you look in the code generated by Qt Designer, you'll find that it writes TR around everything. And in your own code, if you write stuff like this, you might need or be required by your company to put TR around it. That makes it possible for you to translate. It's a function, but it's a keyword that the translation mechanism in Qt is looking for and say, oh, so TR hello world, we'll put that into a file. Then that file can be sent off to the translators. That will translate hello world into Hej verden, if this was in Danish. I don't know why we would say that, but anyway, that's what it would sound like. Again, Hej verden. There you are. It's possible to get data out of strings, integers or float, for example, using this toInt and toFloat, which takes an optional bool pointer to be filled out by toInt or toFloat if it was actually able to convert the string to a meaningful integer or a meaningful float. However, you might have low-level APIs, and that's the second part here. I don't know, well, because it says data can be extracted from strings, that's why they are on the same slide here. We should have a cut in between with an advert. Hey, that's a great idea. Let's do that. If you need help with your project, then reach out to us and we will give you a complete free offer. No strings attached. No strings attached. It's in the section on QString. Anyway, reach out to us. We will likely be able to help you. And back to Jesper. You're talking about something with byte arrays, right? Indeed, I was. And the background for all of this is that if you have some low-level API that was created in the 80s or by somebody that did not know about modern C++, it might take a char pointer. And how do you get from a QString to a char pointer? That's not super easy. It's actually rather difficult because you need to ask yourself a vital question, which might be very difficult to answer. Namely, what encoding does that API expect? Is it regular ASCII? And there's a link here for an interesting article about ASCII from Wikipedia. If you don't know what that is, you do, but it's an interesting article. Go read it. Not now, later. Or is it in UTF-8? Likely not, given that it's a char pointer API, but it might be in Big 5 or in Cyril or in some other of the many, many encodings that existed in the early days when we were using char pointers. So first thing you need to do is to figure out, how do I get to that, to Latin 1, to UTF-8, to local 8-bit, or create an instance of a QText codec and convert to Cyril, to Big 5, to whatever, using that codec. That was the first step. That will get you a QByteArray. The QByteArray, however, is only the intermediate. It is an array of bytes. As the name says, it's a pretty good name for that, I'd say. What you need to get to the char pointer is call .data or .constdata on your QByteArray instance. And that's where it gets tricky, because what data and constdata returns you is basically more or less a pointer to the internal representation in there. So be super careful. It feels like it's a fat class that you can call methods on, but what it really is, when you call that method, you get a pointer to its internal representation. Let me show you an example where it can go really wrong. So this is my Qt creator. I have a method up here, some API, that takes a const char pointer. It just prints out with cout, so I could have given it a std string, which would be more sane, but I need to show you a low-level API taking a const char pointer or a char pointer. I call that down here, some API with my char array. My char array I got from my string where I called to Latin1 .constdata that got me a const char pointer. And it feels like, hey, I'm even const here, so feels good. Nothing can go wrong. But before I call this one, I assign a new value to it. And as you know by now, because I've told you already, I'm just giving a pointer to the internal data structure. What I'll get out is something really weird. I get printed out just B, not bar. So it's not really entirely a pointer to the internal data structures, but something definitely goes wrong by doing that. And the question is, how do I solve this? Well, first of all, before I answer that question, let's identify what is going on here on my screen. Well, this is a warning that my Qt Creator shows. It's not that my Qt Creator knows itself. It calls continuously behind the scene. It calls this tool called Clazy. And Clazy will then look at my Qt code and identify potential problems, like returning data of a temporary byte array is a really bad idea. If you don't know what Clazy is, go and look at this episode here from Qt Widgets and more, where I tell you how to get Clazy working both from within Qt Creator, or if you're not using Qt Creator for some reason, then from the command line. But the solution is as simple as this. Just take it out here and put it right in the call here. Of course, now foo equal to bar. I can't get that somewhere in between here anyway, but also you can see the warning here is gone because now my foo is alive till after my sum API has been executed. So be careful with that, and by all means do get into a habit of having a Clazy and clang-tidy clean code base so that you can have it as part of your CI, part of your pre-commit to execute these tools, and part of your API to tell you right away, hey, there is a problem in your code right here. QString is a fat API. I told you that long ago already by now. And what that means is that it has a lot of methods on it. It's not just a container of your characters, which could be enough. It is for string, but it has a lot of methods operating on these, which makes it somewhat easier to work with. And you can see here, for example, I can concatenate two strings by just using plus operator here, or I can append to a string with plus equal to. I can ask the string to be simplified, which returns a new string, and the new string has consecutive spaces. So if you have two spaces after each other or 28 spaces after each other, they will be converted into one space, and I'll remove spaces from the start and the end of the string. Useful if you ask the user for type in your full name in a line edit, for example. Then me, I'm Jesper Pedersen. I'm not Jesper space Pedersen, which would be somewhat difficult to compare in a string search somewhere else. I'm Jesper, a single space, no spaces before Jesper, no spaces after Pedersen. So simplified is your friend. You can ask for the first 8 characters of a string by left 8. You can ask for the last 8 characters from right 8. And if you want the 8 characters from position 5, then mid 5, 8. If you want from position 5 to the end of the string, then just mid 5, no comma something. The default is huge number, meaning to the end of the string. Left justified and right justified, you can see down here. If I have a string, then I can pad it somehow. Useful if you're printing out a standard output and want to format it somehow nicely. We'll see that in the next episode. Or if you present something in a QText browser or QText edit or something like that, and you want things to line up. Of course, it will all be broken if you line up and you have a variable with font, but that's for another day. You can convert your strings to lower and to uppercase by to upper and to lower, and, well, the other way around. Obviously, there is no to capitalize, but that is relatively easy to implement. I'll make that an exercise for the interested viewer. Oh, I haven't said that in a long time, have I? And finally, if you have some API that takes a std string rather than a QString, or rather than a char pointer, then to std string and from std string to do the conversions there. Rather fat and nice API. if you are concatenating, or when you're building your strings, you might concatenate them together with using the operator plus. So string equal to, or string name equal to first name plus last name. That works just fine. Well, you might want to plus a space in between. If you do that, in any case, you should go and watch this episode here from Qt Widgets and More, where I talked to Jesper Pedersen about String Builder. It's a plugin, a drop-in thing that will make concatenating strings slightly faster. But as always, there is a catch. Anyway, if you concatenate strings, you have one problem if you do it in the context of internationalization. Namely, that words might appear different in different languages. In English, we might say, I am, as we say down here, I am processing file whatever. No, I'm processing file 3 of 10, and the file name is foo.bar. But in other languages, that might come out really weird if you say it that way. And if you were concatenating strings, if I was concatenating processing file and then space with QString number of I, my current one here, and concatenating that with space off space, and then so on, the translator would have no way of reordering your strings. And even worse, well, also bad, is that he would need to translate space off space, which is like off. That could mean, just in English, we have off and off. I have off with a single F and off with two F's, and I can never myself figure out when to use them. So anyway, the point is that in those situations, what you want to do instead is to call .arg on your string. And it works like this. So here I have the part that goes into the string. This is TR, meaning it's for translation. So this is the marker for our translation tools that says that this string should be translated. Your translator will see processing file %1 of %2 : %3. And if it's not obvious for him what that means, then comma after the TR here, where you specify some additional information to, it basically means I'm processing %2 files, and it's the %1 I'm currently being processing, and it's out of %3. And then the translator will say, okay, then I know how to translate that. This whole TR with blah, 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 blah returns a QString. That QString has this method arg up here, and I call .arg with I. That returns me a new QString. .arg with total, which returns me yet another QString, and .arg with file name, which returns yet another QString. And when I call .arg, any of these, what really happens is that the current QString, or the method, will go through the current QString and look for the lowest number %sign. So if I said processing file %10 of %20 : %30, it would work just the same as with 1, 2, and 3. That leaves a catch. Imagine that I here was a QString of some kind, and I said processing file, then %1 here, .arg I would then replace this %1 with whatever came out of that QString. Now imagine that what in the I was a string that had a %1 itself. Then it would say blah, 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 %1 of %2, %3. And now total would find the %1 that came out of this %1 here. And it would replace that one. To avoid that, we have a multi-arg version of .arg that takes a number of QStrings. And this will do the conversion in one go. So no creating a temporary QString, creating a temporary QString, creating a temporary QString. It'll do it in one go. But it will also avoid this problem of the %1 coming out of my .arg up here. Let me give you a small word of warning here. I've seen many times that people, is using the multi-arc and do not realize that the multi-arc version only works with QString, QString, QString. And let me just go here and look at QCreator over here. And just let's go and find QString. Take this version here. And if I scroll a bit down here, you'll notice that .arc is overloaded in a number of different methods or a number of different versions. So that makes a lot of sense. That's why I can say .arc with an integer and .arc with a QString, wherever that is, and so on. But there's also this multi-version arc here, which takes a number of strings. Now, if I can find my way back to my slides, what this version of the .arc here says that, well, I will take my D. That's what will go in here. So I have a D as 12.33, but it should go in and be formatted like this. And let's just go back. Why did I go away here? D. So let's find there is a double. Field width, format, precision, field character. So that's what we have over here. Field width, that's the number of padding in front of it. The format is E, so that brings me to this here. And the number of, well, I got it wrong, I'm sure, but my point is that if I call this .arc here, and I think that, or if this one here, if I replace that with just .arc I total file name, then I might end up calling one of these. And I have many times seen people do a .arc with two integers, and first is the integer, and then the second is the padding, and then you'll get a string that is 10 million characters long, and it's padded with space in front. Not what people expect. So should you be using the multi-arc or should you be using the single arcs? The truth is somewhere in between. When you're using the multi-arc, at least be super careful that what you're providing are actually QStrings. QString, as I said, is a fat API and has a fat API. And one of the things that you can ask a QString about is the length of the string, which will return you. And then we also have end. Yes, I know. I was the length of the string, which means what? Let me just make a phone call here. You're using your phone as a calculator. Why can I not use my calculator as a phone?
Yo, Jesper.
Yeah. Hi, Pepe. It's Jesper. Yeah, I have a bit of problems with QString length.
Listen, I'm going to let you finish real quick. I just wanted to point out what QString length actually returns to you. QString length is just a measure of storage. How much memory do you need to store that string somewhere? In memory, on disk, and so on. And specifically, since a QString character type is 2 bytes long, then you need to double the amount that QString length actually returns to you. That's all it is to it. It's a measure of storage. It's not how many Unicode characters are stored into a string. It's not how many characters do you see on the screen when you display that string. And it's not how many pixels those characters need when you again display them on the screen. Those are all very interesting questions. They all deserve an answer. It's just not that calling QString length is going to answer any of those, just the storage. Now, if you want to know more about this, I gave a talk some time ago. I'm going to leave you a link to this video in the description. And in that talk, I'm going to explain everything that you wanted to know about Unicode handling in Qt. So watch out. But again, thank you very much for the little insert. Please continue.
Okay, so much enlightened about what length means. Let's look at some of the other APIs here. Ends with and starts with, you can compare, or you can test whether a string ends in another string or starts in another string or starts in a character or end in a character or a regular expression. Contains, does it contain a specific string, character, regular expression? Index of, give me the index of the next match and you can even provide a starting index for that matches this, again, character, string, or regular expression. And as I said, character, string, or regular expression, each of these tags are overloaded to that. And regular expression we'll talk about in the next episode. But before we get to the next episode, let me just tell you a few more APIs available in QString. First of all, we have QString split, which takes a string and splits it up into a list of strings for a given character or a given substring. And that's very useful if you, for example, ask the user for provide names of everybody for the party you want as in a line edit or whatever, and the user is providing that with comma separated, then take your string, split with a comma, and now you got a list of all the people for your birthday party. The opposite operation is done with join. So you have a list of strings, you want it to be one string, merged together with a given substring or character. Join is your friend. Replace in strings. If you have a list of strings and you want to do a search and replace in all of those, then replace in strings. And please provide in the documentation below, the comment section below, your usage of replace in strings. I never ever used that method. Filter is another one of those that I have never used. What it does is that it filters the string for a pattern. And the reason why I have not used that is because I'm a huge fan of algorithms, which you might know if you watch me on Qt Widgets and more. And there's an episode here on Qt Widgets and more where I'll tell you about a algorithm library for filtering and transforming and lots of other nifty things that goes very well with Qt that I use in my own project. So once you are done with watching this video, go over there and watch it. And that's actually the end of this episode here. There was a few videos that was worthwhile watching, so you can watch them until tomorrow when the next episode is released, or until next time you have time to watch the next episode. Until then, have a great time.